It began with a knock at the door. I had just poured my first cup of coffee, the aroma drifting lazily through the kitchen, when I heard the firm thud of the mail carrier's footsteps on the porch. I opened the door, expecting bills, maybe a catalog I'd throw away. But instead, nestled in the stack, was a large, ominous envelope with red block letters across the front. Urgent. Foreclosure notice. My stomach dropped. At first, I stared at it blankly, willing the words to rearrange themselves into something less horrifying. Foreclosure? That couldn't be right. There must be some mistake. We paid our mortgage on time. Or at least, Daniel said we did. He handled most of the finances, always insisting it was easier that way. He was the organized one, the responsible one. I just trusted him. Hands trembling, I tore the envelope open. Inside was a letter, official, cold, merciless, informing us that our home was in default. Payments hadn't been made in over 6 months. The foreclosure process had begun. The bank had a court date. We could be out by the end of next month. The room began to spin. I sank onto the couch, reading the letter over and over, searching for loopholes, for typos, for a name that wasn't mine. But it was all there. Our address, our loan number, and, worst of all, my signature. A smooth, precise replica. But I knew it wasn't mine. I didn't remember signing anything. I hadn't authorized anything. My hands felt suddenly foreign, as though they'd betrayed me without my knowledge. When Daniel walked in from his morning run, sweat on his brow and earbuds dangling from his neck, I was still gripping the letter. "Hey, babe, you okay?" he asked casually, reaching for his water bottle. I held the letter out. "What the hell is this?" He squinted, then took the paper with a confused expression. His eyebrows pulled together as he skimmed it. Then he looked up at me with the most convincing display of disbelief I'd ever seen. "What?" "No, this has to be a mistake," he said, already pulling out his phone. "Let me call the bank. This has to be some clerical error." But something about his voice, too calm, too rehearsed, made my spine stiffen. "Did you know about this?" "Of course not," he said quickly, with a hurt look, as if I'd insulted him. "Why would I hide something like this from you?" That question hung in the air like smoke. I watched as he dialed the number, walked into the other room, and shut the door behind him. He'd never taken calls in private before. I stood motionless in the living room, the letter still clutched in my hand like a grenade with the pin pulled. My pulse thudded in my ears. Every instinct screamed at me that something was wrong. This wasn't a bank error. This wasn't bad luck. This was the beginning of a nightmare. And deep down, I knew Daniel wasn't just hiding something, he was hiding everything. The day after the foreclosure letter arrived, I couldn't stop shaking. Every corner of the house felt unfamiliar, like I was trespassing in a life that no longer belonged to me. The place Daniel and I once called our forever home now felt like a crime scene, and I had no idea who the criminal truly was. I waited until Daniel left for work. He kissed me on the forehead as usual, said, "Don't stress too much, babe, I'll straighten this out, promise." But the way his eyes avoided mine said more than his words ever could. The moment I heard his car pull away, I locked the door behind him and marched straight to his office. My heart pounded so loudly it echoed in my ears. I was about to violate 10 years of unspoken marital trust, but that trust had already been shattered. I started with his filing cabinet. It was neatly organized. Too neatly. The mortgage statements were there, yes, but only up until 6 months ago. After that, nothing. A blank space where the truth should have been. I checked our joint bank account online. A few regular debits. Nothing alarming. But when I looked into the savings account we'd built for emergencies, it was nearly empty, less than $400. That account had over $45,000 just a year ago. My chest tightened, I moved faster, opening every drawer, rifling through stacks of documents. I found credit card statements I didn't recognize, loans I never signed, names of financial institutions I'd never done business with. all of them traced back to Daniel. He hadn't just dropped the ball, he had quietly set fire to it and watched it roll downhill. When he came home that night, I tried to play it cool. I needed more answers before I accused him. He brought in takeout and tried to act normal, even cracking a joke about the bank mix-up. I didn't laugh. Later that evening, I noticed something else. He was constantly checking his phone. A message would flash and he'd quickly turn it over, screen down. At one point, I caught a glimpse, a name I didn't recognize, L. Monroe. It meant nothing to me then, but it made my stomach turn. That night, while pretending to sleep beside him, I heard him slip out of bed and take a call in the hallway. "No, she doesn't suspect anything," he whispered. "Just keep quiet and stick to the plan. We're almost there." I lay in the dark, frozen, my breath shallow. My husband, my Daniel, wasn't trying to fix things. He was hiding them. The next morning, I called the mortgage lender myself. I needed to hear it from someone who had no reason to lie to me. The woman on the phone was kind, almost hesitant, as she pulled up our account. "Yes, ma'am. There have been multiple missed payments, and actually, there was a loan modification submitted 8 months ago. It was approved with both parties' signatures." "Both parties? But I never," my voice cracked. "I have a scanned copy of the authorization, if you'd like me to email it," she said. When it arrived, my blood turned to ice. My name. My signature. But not my hand. The foundation wasn't just cracked, it was crumbling beneath my feet. I couldn't sleep, not because of the foreclosure notice or the drained bank account, or even the forged signature, though each of those alone was enough to unravel me. No. What haunted me most were Daniel's late-night whispers, and that name I'd glimpsed on his phone, L. Monroe. It nagged at the corners of my memory like a song I couldn't place. I couldn't explain why it unsettled me so deeply, until, one morning, I finally remembered Leah Monroe, a name I hadn't spoken aloud in 2 years, my former best friend, the woman who vanished from my life with no explanation, no goodbye, and no warning. One day we were inseparable. Brunches, shopping trips, wine-fueled confessions, and the next, she was gone. Her number disconnected. Her apartment emptied out. Daniel said she had issues and didn't want to be found. I believed him. Now I knew better. My hands trembled as I pulled out Daniel's laptop. He'd forgotten to log out. My heart thundered as I typed L. Monroe into the search bar. There it was. A bank transfer to Monroe Holdings LLC, logged just 3 weeks ago. $5,000. Then another. For 10. Over a dozen payments, stretching back months. I followed the trail obsessively, opening every PDF, every receipt. And there, buried inside one of the invoices, was an address, a high-rise luxury condo in the city, one I recognized instantly from a real estate listing I'd admired months ago. Daniel had laughed and said it was out of our league. Apparently, it wasn't out of her league. Fueled by a rage I didn't know I had, I drove to the building. The concierge hesitated when I asked for the unit number. "I'm her sister," I lied, flashing my wedding ring like a badge. He finally relented, buzzing me in. I took the elevator to the 17th floor, my breath shallow, my hands clenched into fists. The hallway was quiet. Immaculate. I walked up to the door. Unit 1703. My heart slammed against my ribs. I raised my hand to knock. Then the door swung open. And there she was. Leah, wearing Daniel's favorite hoodie. Her hair was longer, her smile softer, but the shock on her face was unmistakable. It was the same shock reflected on mine. For a moment, we both just stood there, in a stunned silence that stretched too long. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. I wanted to scream, cry, rip the hoodie off her body, but all I said was, "How long?" She looked down. "It's not what you think." "Oh, save it." I stepped forward, forcing her to retreat. He used my name, my signature, my house, and now I find you in his clothes, living in a condo I unknowingly helped pay for? She bit her lip, blinking fast. Daniel said you knew that you'd agreed to everything." I laughed, hollow and disbelieving. "He lied to both of us." "No," she said quietly. "He promised me we'd start over soon. He said you were unstable." There it was. The final twist of the knife. Not only had he stolen from me, he'd replaced me. The woman I once trusted with my secrets had become the woman who held my husband's lies. And just like that, the last thread of my old life snapped. I turned and walked away without another word, the world outside spinning as my knees threatened to buckle, but I didn't fall. I couldn't. Because I wasn't just betrayed, I was about to become dangerous. I couldn't get the image out of my head. Leah standing in Daniel's hoodie, her expression caught between guilt and confusion. Her words echoed louder with each passing hour. "He said you were unstable." I didn't know what was worse, that Daniel was telling people I was mentally unwell, or that someone I once loved like a sister believed him. The next morning, I awoke before dawn, my face still puffy from a restless, tear-stained night. But the grief had soured into something sharper. Cold, calculated clarity. I had to stop trusting my instincts. I needed proof, evidence that would scream the truth louder than Daniel's carefully spun lies. So I returned to his office. This time, I focused on the locked drawer I'd always thought was used for tax records. I had no key, but desperation makes you resourceful. A bobby pin, a twist, and a little prayer later, the drawer popped open. Inside were folders, contracts, scanned documents, a mess of paper trails. I sorted through them feverishly until one file stopped me cold. Loan modification agreement. My heart pounded as I pulled it out and examined the contents. There it was again, my name, my signature, staring up at me in confident strokes. But the date was from 8 months ago. I hadn't signed anything that month. I was in the hospital with my mother after her surgery. I hadn't touched a single loan form. Not even to look at it. My fingers went numb. I dropped the file onto the desk and stepped back as if it had burned me. It wasn't just a scribble, it was a weapon. I took a deep breath, grabbed my phone, and snapped photos of every page. I needed a record, something I could refer back to when I started to doubt myself. Because Daniel's gift wasn't just deception, it was distortion. He had a way of making you question the ground you stood on. When he returned home that evening, I waited until he was halfway through his post-workout smoothie before I confronted him. "I found the loan document," I said, calmly placing the file on the kitchen counter between us. He glanced at it, then back at me. "What document?" "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Pretend you don't know." He sighed dramatically and leaned back against the fridge. "You've been going through my things again? That's your takeaway?" I snapped. "Not the fact that you forged my signature?" He crossed his arms, his face unreadable. "You must have forgotten signing it. You were overwhelmed with your mom's surgery. It was a rough time." "No, Daniel, I didn't forget. I didn't sign it." My voice cracked, fury boiling under my skin. He tilted his head with practiced sympathy. "You've been under so much stress lately. Maybe you're confusing. Do not gaslight me." I slammed my hand down on the counter, the sound echoing through the kitchen. His eyes narrowed for a flash. Just a flicker. But it was enough. The mask slipped. "I'm not crazy. I'm not confused. And I'm done pretending this is something it's not," I said, my voice trembling. "You've lied, you've stolen, and now you've committed fraud." He didn't deny it. He didn't say a word. Instead, he picked up his smoothie and walked out of the room. Like nothing had happened. But everything had changed. Because now, I had proof. And soon, he'd have consequences. Something inside me had shifted. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was purpose, precision. I wasn't crying in the shower or pacing through panic attacks. I was planning, watching, waiting. Every breath Daniel took under my roof now felt like a countdown to detonation. He thought he was still in control. He thought I was unraveling. But he had no idea just how focused I'd become. That Saturday, Daniel left for what he claimed was a, quote, quick meeting with a client. He kissed me on the cheek like we were still in love, like he hadn't ripped the foundation of my life out from under me. I smiled back, playing my role. The second the door clicked shut, I was on his laptop. I had tried before, but he'd always been meticulous, clearing his history, logging out of every account. But that morning, either from arrogance or oversight, he'd left something open, a synced browser window. Email. I hesitated. Not because I felt guilty, those days were over, but because I sensed that whatever I was about to uncover would change everything. Once I saw it, I wouldn't be able to unsee it. And I was right. There, in plain sight, was an email thread labeled, Offshore Transfer Schedule Confidential. My heart pounded as I clicked it open. At first, it was numbers. Wire transfer amounts. Account details. Banking codes I didn't recognize. But then I saw names. His name. And Leah's. The subject line had been misleadingly sterile. The contents were anything but. Baby, just 3 more weeks. The final transfers go through on the 19th. After that, we ghost the States and leave it all behind. New names, new lives, no more lies. Don't worry about her. She's too emotional to figure any of this out. I've got her on edge. Makes it easy to keep her distracted. Can't wait to finally be free of this life. And her. My stomach twisted. My hands clenched so tightly around the mouse they turned white. I scrolled further. Messages dated just days ago. Daniel's tone was cold, calculating. Like I wasn't a human being, just a step in his exit strategy. The worst part? He'd convinced Leah that I was unstable, paranoid, unfit. And she believed him. She wasn't just complicit, she was eager, planning their new life abroad while I sat in the ruins of the one he'd destroyed. He had stolen my house, my savings, my peace of mind. Now he was preparing to steal my identity. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I began taking screenshots. Every message, every attachment, every bank detail. I emailed them to myself, to a flash drive, and to a new cloud account Daniel would never find. My hands moved like a machine, each click an act of silent war. By the time he returned, all charm and fake cheer, I was back in the living room, pretending to read a book. He dropped grocery bags on the counter like everything was normal, and I smiled at him. Because I knew. Because now I had everything. And he had no idea he'd just lost control. The problem with digging up lies is that the deeper you go, the more rot you find. I thought I was uncovering a personal betrayal. One man cheating one woman. But the further I followed the threads Daniel had left behind, the more I realized I wasn't the only one caught in his web. It started with a call to his brother, Marcus. We weren't especially close, but I remembered Daniel once mentioning that Marcus had helped him out with some paperwork months ago. That phrase haunted me. I needed to know exactly what kind of help he had given. "Hey Marcus," I said as cheerfully as I could manage. "Quick question. Did you ever co-sign anything for Daniel recently? Maybe a loan?" There was a pause, just long enough to confirm my worst fear. "Yeah," he finally said. "He told me you guys were refinancing the house and needed to do it fast before interest rates went up. He said you'd already signed and that you were swamped with your mom being in the hospital, so I figured, why not? Just helping family, right?" I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. "Marcus, I never signed anything. That whole story was a lie." Silence. Then a low and horrified, "Jesus Christ." I thanked him, promised to share more soon, and hung up. But that was only the beginning. The next discovery came when I reviewed Daniel's business transactions. He ran his own small consulting firm. At least, that's what he told me. But hidden in the transactions were recurring withdrawals labeled as, quotes, vendor payouts, many in round amounts and to accounts I didn't recognize. I followed one payment to an email address attached to a business account with his company's name on it, except this one ended in international instead of .com, a duplicate entity. And the recipient? His own mother, or at least That's what it looked like, until I dug further and discovered the account had been opened under her name without her knowledge. He was using his dying mother's identity to shuffle funds through legitimate accounts, giving his money laundering schemes a layer of credibility no one would ever question. Until now. I visited her the next day. She was weak from chemo but alert, sweet as ever. I couldn't bring myself to tell her everything, but when I gently asked if she had opened a new account recently, she looked puzzled. No, dear. I haven't touched a bank in months. Why? I shook my head. Just checking. Probably a mistake. But it wasn't. I left her house feeling sick. Daniel hadn't just betrayed me. He'd betrayed everyone who ever trusted him. His brother, his dying mother, even his former employer, who I contacted through LinkedIn on a hunch. After a careful exchange of messages, I learned that Daniel had been quietly investigated for irregular financial activity. Nothing had been proven, but they'd let him go with a severance package, hoping to avoid scandal. He was charming, clever, and calculating. And now I understood the full scope of it. Daniel wasn't a careless liar, he was a career con man, and every day I stayed silent, he built the next phase of his escape. But that was over now. The trap he built for others, I was going to turn it on him. There's a unique kind of terror that settles in your bones when you realize you're racing against a clock you didn't know was ticking. After uncovering the depths of Daniel's deception, the forged documents, the siphoned money, the manipulation of his own family, I should have felt vindicated. But all I felt was urgency. If he was willing to lie so masterfully, so thoroughly, then there was no telling what he might do next. And then I found out. It happened by accident, or fate. Daniel had left his phone on the kitchen counter to shower. Normally, he guarded it like it held national secrets. That morning, he was in a rush, distracted. I stood frozen, staring at the device like it was a live wire. And then the screen lit up. Flight confirmation, 2 passengers, August 15th. Male, female. Male, Eric Dallin. Female, Lana Moore. I tapped the notification before I could second-guess myself. 2 tickets. First class. Maldives. Fake names. But the birthdates matched. My blood turned to ice. My fingers moved quickly now, my fears sharpening into focus. The confirmation email included travel insurance, luggage add-ons. This wasn't a fantasy. It was a full-blown escape plan. I raced upstairs to his office and pulled out the folder I'd previously seen marked Legal Options. Inside, among printed bankruptcy forms and scribbled calculations, was a drafted declaration of insolvency. He planned to file for bankruptcy the day after the flight. He was going to drain every account he could, leave me behind to deal with the debt and ruin, and vanish across the globe with Leah, under new names no less. His entire exit strategy hinged on timing. He was going to disappear, and if I didn't act fast, no one would stop him. I stood in the center of the room, shaking. He had built a life with me, only to loot it like a thief in the night. I could see it all so clearly now. Every late-night call, every deflection, every manipulation was a brick in the road he was building away from me. But I wasn't going to let him walk it. That evening, I played along again. I smiled through dinner. Listened to him talk about the stress of work and how we needed a getaway soon. How he wished he could just take me somewhere and start fresh. He was testing me, softening me edges before his final blow. I excused myself early and locked myself in the bathroom, clutching my phone with white knuckles. I called Kira, a paralegal I'd met through a friend at a local legal clinic. Young, sharp, and ruthless in the best way. I told her everything. The documents, the tickets, the fraud. I have proof, I said. Then you have power, she replied. And I realized for the first time in weeks, I wasn't afraid. The clock was still ticking, but now he was the one running out of time. When you've been lied to for so long, the truth stops feeling like liberation and starts feeling like ammunition. And I was fully armed now. Kira met me that Monday, in the back booth of a quiet coffee shop, her laptop open, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. She was younger than I expected, barely 30, but she exuded a no-nonsense energy that made me instantly trust her. You weren't wrong to come to me, she said after scrolling through the documents I'd brought. This isn't just a civil issue. This is criminal fraud. And he's left a trail wide enough to drive a truck through. I handed her the flash drive. Emails, forged signatures, financial transfers, even the fake names on the flight manifest. She nodded, already backing up the files. He's planning to vanish. That alone makes this urgent. But I wasn't finished. I need more than urgency, I said. I need someone who knows how to take this all the way. Kira gave a small, conspiratorial smile. I know someone who's been waiting for a case like this. That's when she introduced me to Evan Hartley, a bulldog of a prosecutor I hadn't seen since law school. We weren't close back then, but I remembered how ruthless he was during moot court, how he tore apart witnesses like he was born in a courtroom. We met later that evening in his downtown office. He listened quietly as I laid it all out. Every betrayal, every forged paper, every secret Daniel thought he'd buried. When I was done, Evan leaned back in his chair, slowly nodding. This guy's good, he said. Real smooth operator. But he got sloppy. He underestimated you. He thinks I'm weak, I whispered. Evan looked me dead in the eyes. Then let's prove him wrong. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of legal firepower. Kira worked with forensic document examiners to verify the forgeries. She dug into Daniel's corporate records, flagged every shell company he had created, and subpoenaed bank statements through channels I never knew existed. Evan built the case like a chess match, painstakingly aligning every piece so the final move would be impossible to block. He pulled in financial analysts, cybercrime consultants, and even filed for a quiet freeze on Daniel's accounts to stop any last-minute transfers. I watched it all unfold like I was outside my own body. Each late-night meeting, each sealed envelope, each affidavit signed with a shaking hand brought me closer to something I hadn't felt in months. Control. There were moments I still wavered. I'd see Daniel walk into the kitchen like nothing was wrong, humming as he poured his coffee or texting Leah from the garage when he thought I was asleep. But I didn't lash out. I didn't confront him. Because I didn't need to scream anymore. I had a team behind me, a legal arsenal, the truth on my side. And every lie he'd ever told was now a weapon in my hands. The case was ready. And Daniel? He had no idea that Judgment Day was already on the calendar. The morning of the hearing, the sky was slate gray, the kind of color that held the weight of a storm. I stared at myself in the mirror, adjusting the collar of my blazer, stealing my breath. My hands trembled, but not with fear, with the force of every truth I had been forced to bury. This was the day. Daniel arrived at the courthouse with his usual false confidence, dressed in a tailored suit, smirking like he was attending a business seminar. He locked eyes with me across the corridor, and for a moment, time froze. He gave me a tight, dismissive nod, like he was still in control, like I hadn't spent the past 6 weeks dismantling the empire of lies he thought was untouchable. He didn't know about the subpoenas, he didn't know about the frozen accounts, and he certainly didn't know that Leah had flipped. She arrived 10 minutes later with her attorney and a stiff expression, her once glossy hair pulled into a harsh bun. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She didn't have to. Her signature was already on the statement, then handed the prosecution everything they needed: emails, transfers, recordings of late-night conversations Daniel never knew she captured. She said it wasn't revenge, it was self-preservation. She was a pawn too, Evan had reminded me the night before. I didn't know if I believed that, but I didn't care. As we sat in the courtroom, my heart thundered with each new piece of evidence presented. Evan's voice was cool and razor-sharp, laying out Daniel's scheme with the clarity of a surgeon slicing open a cancerous growth. The forged mortgage, the shell companies, the flight plans, the fabricated bankruptcy. And Leah's testimony, delivered with shaky hands and glassy eyes, landed like a hammer. He said she'd never fight back, she whispered into the microphone. That Nasrin was too broken to do anything about it, that once we got the last wire through, we'd disappear. Daniel didn't smirk anymore. He stared at the table, jaw clenched, fingers tapping like a man trying to hold on to the edges of a dream turning to dust. Then came my turn. I stepped up to the stand, my spine straight, my voice steady. I told them everything, not just the crimes, but the manipulation, the gaslighting, The emotional war waged under the guise of love. I described the day I found the foreclosure notice, the forged signature, the betrayal of finding my former best friend wearing my husband's hoodie. And then I held up the folder. My folder, the one that contained every printed lie. The judge listened intently, so did the jury. But the only face I searched for was Daniel's. And when I saw the moment he realized he'd lost, that no amount of charm, denial, or smooth talking could undo the avalanche coming for him, I felt something close to peace. The courtroom recessed for deliberation, but we all knew. The web he spun had collapsed. And now, finally, he was the one caught in it. Daniel was sentenced on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit financial crimes. The charges stacked against him like the lies he'd so carefully constructed. And now, finally, they collapsed under their own weight. The judge called his actions calculated, predatory, and morally bankrupt. A fitting phrase for the man who once convinced me I couldn't survive without him. Now he stood in handcuffs, eyes hollow, jaw tight as the sentence was read aloud. 9 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 5. He didn't look at me once. But I watched him. Watched as the reality of his new life settled on his shoulders like a shroud. No suits, no jet-setting fantasies, no glamorous escape with a mistress. Just time, consequences, and silence. When court adjourned, I walked out into the rain and tilted my face up to the sky. The water mixed with the tears I hadn't realized were falling. For the first time in months, they weren't from pain, they were from relief. From reclamation. From the beginning of something that was mine again. 2 weeks later, I returned to the house. It still bore the scars of what had happened, scattered boxes from almost being packed, the dent in the wall from the night I punched it in rage, Daniel's old leather chair I still hadn't gotten rid of. But it also held something stronger now. Stillness. Safety. Me. The foreclosure proceedings had been reversed thanks to the court's ruling and the evidence I'd provided. My forged signature invalidated the loan. And with Daniel's accounts frozen and restitution ordered, the home was legally restored to me. Brick by brick, the life he tried to steal was rebuilding itself around me. I spent the next few weeks cleaning, repainting, and reclaiming every corner, not just out of necessity, but as a ritual. Every stroke of the brush, every shelf I reorganized was a quiet declaration. I am still here. And I am not broken. Kira visited one afternoon to drop off the final paperwork. She stepped inside, looking around the freshly painted living room. "You're healing," she said softly. "I'm rebuilding," I replied. "Same thing." We shared a quiet smile. Later, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the yard. The same yard where Daniel once promised we'd raise kids. Where we dreamed of summer barbecues, family dogs, and growing old together. He'd poisoned those dreams. But he hadn't destroyed me. Because in the end, I hadn't just exposed a con man. I'd rediscovered a woman who once thought love meant sacrifice, who once thought silence was strength, who now knew that survival wasn't enough. I wanted more than survival. I wanted joy, peace, power. And I would take every step forward knowing one thing above all. He stole everything. But I took it back. And I made it mine again.